it's changing this three-team group format, right? So three teams in one group is just a really bad format. It leaves way too much up to chance and it doesn't really do a lot of good for you. I think that the reason they did three teams is because of the numbers in the league. Right now, 47 teams, right? 29 here, 18 down there. So that's not easy to make a tournament competition out of, right? So you take two teams, bang, here you go. There's you have two teams that are gonna have a bye into the next round. Now here's your three, 15 groups of three, okay, right? And run with it, right? There's no real, I mean, you could do nine groups of five, but even then that gets kind of dicey. It's not easy to do. It also increases the number of games for Apple TV to say, here you go. But next year, the number goes to 48 with San Diego joining, which is a lot easier to work with. So if I'm in charge, what I'm doing is I'm saying goodbye three teams, goodbye two teams getting a bye into the first round. I go, and I'll tell you, I did two different ways. I either go 12 groups of four or eight groups of six. And I've set it up as right now I've done 12 groups of four because it was easiest to explain through. But this balances out a little more and it allows you to work with better geography and limit travel. You have six teams in the West, six groups in the West, six groups in the East. And from there, the top team in each group, let's say the top four from the West, the top four from the East, and then the winner and the runner up of the Clausura, the winner and the runner up of the Apertura, they all get hosting privileges. Right now, if the season ended today, Miami, Cincinnati, Columbus, RBNY, LA Galaxy, LAFC, Salt Lake, Colorado. Those four teams, if it ended right now, would be separate groups along with Cruz Azul and Toluca from this year's Apertura. And just for sake of last year's Clausura, it'd be Club America and Monterrey. So those 12 teams are all in separate groups. They each get to pick, the Liga MX teams get to pick their hub. The MLS teams get to play in their home stadium. You then build the rest of the groups around them. And I don't know, again, I don't know how it balances out in terms of teams from each league or whatever, but all those teams for the group stage stay there. So there's no traveling from Orlando to Montreal to LA and then back to Mexico. You're just there for the week. You're limiting your travel to one trip, and there you go. Every day leading up to this involves the game from four of the groups because MLS has no problem playing all of its games on the same time. Leagues Cup can do the same. So at 7 p.m., you have a game from the first four groups. So East 1, East 2, West 1, and West 2, they all kick off. At 10 p.m., the other two teams from that same group kick off their game. The next day, it goes to East 3, East 4, West 3, West 4. And then the next day, it's East 5, East 6, West 5, West 6. So every 3 days, you're playing a game. The group stage is over in 9 days. I think it took 12 or 13 days to finish this year. So you're cutting down on the group stage already. And there are no weird setups where Red Bull were already knocked out before some teams even kicked off for the first time. Like it's very ordered, very organized. From there, the top two teams in each group go to the knockout bracket, 24 teams in total instead of 32. The best record from the top eight go directly into the round of 16, and then the bottom 16 do they're in the first round, technically. That's the same number of game days with a few less games. And if you cut down the time again from 4 days in between each one to 3 because of travel, maybe you limit the travel a little bit, you can trim the tournament's length down a week from this year's competition. I agree with you. I think one month was just too long to take a break. I mean, especially for the teams that are not getting out of the group. I mean, we sat around for 3 weeks. Both of our teams saw that, right? We sat around for weeks before they kicked off again. It is just a little bit too long, and I think they need to find a way to make it shorter. And I think that's one way to do it is by just keeping things closer because they gave a lot of time in between so that everybody can travel. If you get rid of the travel part of it and reward what you've done in your league, now you don't have to travel. Now you're good.
That was hard to follow. I
Yeah, I
can't really
know.
follow it because
On
and
the
I'm
video,
not yeah,
I'm gonna see if I can do like designs.
I'm not sure I follow because I guess I got lost after you talked about the groups because you talked about either 12 groups of four or eight groups of six.
Forget
But
the eight groups of six. Forget the eight groups of six.
okay,
That's just
even if we
another way to break it down.
even if we take 12 groups of four, you're already creating six extra games you have to play in the group stage by making it 12 groups of four. Because right now you play 15 groups, you play each team in your group once, so you play 30 games. And then if you go 12 groups of four, you're now playing 36 group stage games as opposed to 30. I think you're cutting it down because you've condensed the timing, but I feel like we can cut it down even more if we just figure out some other solution to how we kind of organize it. And I have to think about it a little bit more, but maybe you could do some kind of, rather than having group stages, because I feel like group stages is what's really making it super long, versus we can find some way to give teams maybe buys based on their league performance, and then just do solo knockouts like pretty much any other cup competition does, as
Well,
opposed to like the Champions League.
I won't spoil my third idea, but you're transitioning really well. But what I'll say, we're
We
gonna
should
pause
just
on the
talk about it then
transition.
if it's
We're gonna
transition.
pause on the transition.
Oh,
I'm gonna
okay, but
say
then it's not a
the point
transition.
I'm gonna say the point about the group games is that because of the hub privileges and everybody playing in the same area, you're limiting the amount of time it takes. Yes, you're playing more games, but each game had 5 or 6 days in between because teams had to travel all over the country and then prep and then get a training day in. If you give them, this is your, think MLS is back, right? This is where you're going to play. And it's not for a month where you're going to be missing out on seeing your family and stuff, but you've got a week and a half where you're going to stay in this area and you're going to train and you're going to play and then you'll be either done and go home or you'll move on. But at the end of the day, you're going to go home and then you got 4 days in between or whatever. It trims down on the time, not necessarily the number of games. And that's the
Yeah,
number of games
but what
also
if you
decreases
just
as you go
what
forward.
if you just combine the two things? We just keep it in a hub. I think similar to what US Open Cup does, but like combining your idea into it of like I guess almost like the NCAA tournament. It's like you're gonna play all your game
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this part of the bracket is gonna play your games in this area, like in this stadium.
Hmm.
And eventually it will dwindle down into a small enough region where you can kind of like be like, all right, these last four, the two semifinals and the final is gonna be in this location, this
Right. No, and
random
that's
site or whatever.
that's exactly where I was going with it, but I was also trying to get rid of the randomness of just a random three-team group. Right. I was trying to add a little bit more balance to it. And, this is circa World Cup style, right? 4 teams in a group, everybody plays 3 games, and then best of the best moves on. I was trying to get rid of this. Okay, you're going to play 2 games, one against each team, and it's just I mean, it's a crapshoot, really. Where I think 4 games or 3 games against 3 different opponents gives you a little bit more balance of who probably should go through. I was trying to get away from the 3 team group. That's all it was. And that's why I brought up the 8 groups of 6 too. Now, that's also a whole nother nightmare, but that could go top 2 from each one of those groups moves on and then right into your knockout bracket from round of 16 instead of having that extra round there. But I think that puts too much emphasis on the group stage and it gets a little bit messy from there. So I
I,
see what you're
I
saying, but
well, I will set you up for your transition again so we could try it again, but I don't I think we should just stray like if you're gonna have this many teams, just stray away from the group stage at this point because we already kind of went through the whole like pausing the season thing for a World Cup size tournament. I don't think that was well received based on, you know, pausing in the middle of the season for this like 2 month long break so you can get this tournament in. I don't think that's the way to go about it. So I think I mean it's a cup at the end of the day. Like if you look at European cups, they're I mean, I don't have all the data in front of me. I'm sure there's some that do it differently, but
not
they're
prepared. Wow.
they're just knockout style tournaments. It's not like we have group stages in the
Hmm.
FA Cup or the Leagues Cup or the DFB Pokal. Like you just knockouts because it's just a cup. You know, it's not the regular season. It's not the Champions League. Like just have it be knockouts. You don't have to have group stages, and it doesn't always have to be like, oh, the best teams out of the best teams must move on. Like that's kind of the fun of the cup is it's like, all right, this is the chance that if you are struggling in the league, all of a sudden you can start doing some magic here in this cup. And it's not that League's Cup in the current format doesn't have that with the group stages. Obviously, we've seen that already, but I think having just pure knockouts not only makes it go faster, so you have less of a pause if you're going to keep this break in the season, but kind of adds more element of randomness, kind of fun that I think people would more so look for in a cup competition.
Yeah. And that is where my last idea goes from. Unless you want to throw one more in there. I know you've got tons of them because this is all you
I,
think about, I'm sure.
I'm just gonna keep some of them in the bank for when we have part two of this episode.
Yeah, something like that. Um, no, my third idea, and I've kind of hinted at it before, is